So let's talk about something that seems to be a new phenomenon that's been happening, especially in the last, 15 years. I would say more so in the last 5 to 10 years, it's been a lot more popular, and that's social influencers. Now, who goes online in any type of capacity? And today you can go on, I'm just going to name a few, but you can go on Facebook, you can go on Instagram, you can go on YouTube, you can go on TikTok, you can go on, I can continue. But like the point is like you can go on all these different sites, and they are social media sites where you get to interact with people, and then you usually find some type of maybe an advertisement or somebody saying something about some product or something like that, or maybe somebody's trying to push a certain brand. And these people that do this, so like let's say I am fairly popular on social media, which by the way I'm not, because A, Facebook deleted my account and they own everything, so they deleted all my accounts. And B, I'm not trying to be a social influencer, I guess, so maybe that's part of it. Or maybe I'm just hated by the public. I don't know, it's one of these. So what ends up happening, let's pretend that I was very popular and I had, 100,000 followers, 1 million followers, whatever it was. Maybe a brand would reach out to me. And the brand would say, hey, if you give me a 30-second video on your social media sites, we'll pay you this amount, okay? And so they have learned to take their influence and monetize it, okay? So if you look online, you'll see this everywhere. This is like the new way of marketing. You get people that you know are attached to an X amount of people. You pay them a certain amount depending on how many people they can influence, and they share about your product. Sometimes they share about it biasedly and sometimes unbiasedly, but sometimes in the contract that they write to be influenced, it says, hey, make sure you only say good things, okay, and we'll pay you this much money. Well, depending on how much money that is, maybe they'll be like, yeah, this is a really great product, right? And so a lot of the reviews and the things that we see are paid for. And so we're getting a doctored version of what maybe the truth is or what a review is. So there's a lot of this stuff out there. So social media influencers, social influencers. Now, I just want to say this, whether it's a big platform like that or a small platform, do you know that you are all influencers? You all are. And sometimes you can influence for good, and sometimes you can influence for bad. And I want to say this to the believers. Because you're a Christian doesn't guarantee that your influence is good. Okay? You don't like auto-check good influence because you believe God's on your side. Like, you're still a human, you still might need Pepto-Bismol, and you still might make mistakes. Right? So because you're human and you may mess up and you may be a bad influence as a Christian, it's only right for us as Christians to try to make it as right as possible, right? So you can be a good influence, but you could also be a bad influence, and whether you're a Christian or not, you could be both, right? You could be a good influence or a bad influence. And so how do we choose to try to influence the world around us? Do we consider the fact that we could be influential to the world around us? Or do we look at somebody else and say, but they have so many more followers, they have so much more popularity, they speak in such a way, they're blah, 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 right? I barely influence anybody. I can't influence much, but they can influence much. So it's not really a burden for me because who cares what I have to say? Who cares how I act? It's not going to make a big difference. This kind of reminds me of Moses, where God came to Moses and he said, hey, I have a job for you. And Moses is like, I don't know how to speak. I can't do it. I'm not a good leader. I don't think so. But God gave Moses a huge influence over many people, even though he didn't feel adequate, even though he wasn't very maybe popular in that way, maybe he didn't know how to monetize his non-gifting or whatever you want to call it, but God chose to use him. So what am I saying? God can choose to use you to influence people in small amounts and big amounts. How are you going to influence them? That's my question. How are you going to influence them? Here's the bottom line. You're an influencer. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for each person listening in and that is here. I pray, God, that you would anoint their ears to hear what you're saying here this morning. God, I ask that as we dive into a bit of this idea of influence and how we can be influenced or influence people, I pray, God, that you would speak to us, that we would sense your presence and your conviction and your guidance in our hearts, and Lord, that you would have your way. I pray, God, that you would anoint my ears to continue to hear you. You would anoint my lips to speak what you want me to say. I pray, God, that I'll say all the things that you want me to say and nothing that you don't want me to say. I pray for each individual listening that you would anoint their ears to hear your word sharply, and they would hear your word clearly. I thank you so much for who you are, God. I thank you for your Spirit. I thank you for your guidance. I thank you for your Son, Jesus, that died on the cross in our place. I thank you for your Father's heart that you give to us, God, and how you continue to chasten us and love us. And Lord, when you do correct us, it's only because you love us and you want to see the best for us. So thank you for seeing great potential in us when we don't. Help us and influence us here this morning, God. In your name, Jesus, amen. Okay. So before I hop in today, I just want to recap a little bit because we did have a week break, right? So before that week break, did you guys know that we were going through Acts for 20 weeks straight so far? 20 weeks. I gave you a break, so you didn't have to hear my voice very much for 1 week, but now we're back in it. So maybe I'll take another break. We'll see. But so far, we have gone 20 weeks through Acts. I've really enjoyed it. Personally, I hope that you've enjoyed it as well. I hope you've learned some stuff. I hope that it's helped shape your Christianity and your relationship with God. But let's recap. So before last week, there was 2 weeks that we talked mostly in Acts chapter 15, and we dipped into 16 last week up to about verse 15. So the main things that we talked about in the first week of that was conflict and how they were trying to figure out how was God extending salvation to non-Jews. And so there was a little bit of a disagreement. There was some different thoughts and theology about how that would work. Some people said, you have to come under the law first, then after you come to the law, under the law, then you can believe in Jesus, then you can go. That's how it has to get done. And then Paul and his team were like, wait, we went into non-Jewish land and we shared the gospel. We saw the Holy Spirit fall on people without coming under the law. And therefore, I have to believe that God is extending salvation to non-Jews not under this law. Now, in that, they also agreed. They're like, okay, so they wrestled through it and they're like, yeah, that makes sense. However, here's these 4 rules that they should start participating in. Maybe they don't have to do all the laws and all the things that we did before, but these 4 are really going to mess things up if they don't get these 4 right. So they shared these things because they wanted Gentiles and Jews to be able to get along and be under the same roof and pursue Jesus as Messiah and what he was trying to do in their midst, okay? So that was basically week 1, where we saw that they wrestled through it and they figured it out. So we realized that sometimes they can wrestle through it and figure it out and keep going in a direction. Then the following week, we saw Paul and Barnabas. They had a sharp disagreement, and their sharp disagreement was basically off of, should John Mark go or not? Okay? Now, as I told you before, Barnabas was the cousin to John Mark, and there might have been family ties there. There might have been like, I really want my cousin with me. I'm like the only one that can disciple him. Like, I really want to be with him. We don't really know what happened, but we do know that they disagreed so much, and Paul as the leader was like, no, we cannot do this. This is not right, for whatever reason. And so they decided to split. Okay? And then we continue on, and what we notice is Paul and Barnabas kind of Barnabas and John Mark kind of drift out of the scene, and then Paul takes up Silas and gets moving and continues on the mission that he was on. And so we saw these 2 different things. And so the reason why I'm bringing it back up is A, to recap, and B, to remind you is like sometimes we won't get along, and we can try to figure it out, and we should try to figure it out. And sometimes, if we can't, maybe it's best that we figure out where we're supposed to be and who we're supposed to follow. And now follow Jesus first. All right, right? But Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. And if that's hard for you to follow Paul as he follows Christ, then maybe it's best to find another Paul, perhaps. So here we are. This is kind of what has happened. Right after that, we see that there's all this direction that is given. Closed doors, open doors, God giving vision. And then Paul's like, okay, I got this vision. This is where we're supposed to go. Let's go here. We've gotten all these closed doors. The Spirit of Jesus stopped us. The Holy Spirit said no. But now here's this vision. Let's go there. Okay? So they go to this place, and they end up interacting with some people. And people ended up getting saved, and the Holy Spirit was working there. So that's basically where we were just at. Where we stopped was this girl, Lydia, was like, how can I serve you? What can I do? How can I be involved? Let me know, let me know, let me know. Very persistent woman, right? As many women are. Nobody laughed. This is very, very smart males here and offended females. I'm sorry. All right. So let's begin. Now we're in verse 16. We're going to talk about some, what I consider pretty interesting stuff. So let's dive in. Ready? As we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune telling. Are you following so far? Some important information there. Just so you know, this is likely the place that they found in verse 13 that they were like, we assume that maybe this is the prayer place. So it's likely that this prayer place, now they're like, yeah, it is a prayer place. We know it's a prayer place. So now they're going to the place that is for prayer. This is where, at this place, this is where they meet this slave girl, okay? Now really quick, a spirit of divination would be a demonic influence through fortune-telling, psychic powers, or some type of mediation for the dead, or from the dead, or to the dead. So that's what we're talking about, okay, when we talk about divination. There's a few more things that you can talk about with that too, but so to actually accomplish this thing of divination, just to be clear, it is supernatural, okay? Divination doesn't come naturally. Okay, it is a supernatural thing. But just because I said supernatural, to be clear, it does not mean it's godly, it is demonic. Okay? So, I just want to be honest about that part so you understand that just because it's supernatural, all things that are supernatural aren't God. Okay? So, but Mike, many people try doing some form of this today. And I believe some are doing it by using their own intelligence or experience to tell someone's future. It's just for fun anyway. My official response to that is do not entertain it. That's my official response. Do not entertain it. As a follower of Jesus, you are called to trust your future to God, not to man or anything else for that matter. Okay? So when this comes up, here goes tangent number one. There are people that claim to be Christians that are messing with this, okay? Just because, I always say this, just because somebody calls themselves a Christian doesn't mean they are, right? And just because they are a Christian or they call themselves Christian doesn't mean that they're perfect, right? Some people could be accidentally dabbling in this stuff, which is still not cool, right? That's where a nice brother or sister should come along and be honest about it. Tell them the problem with it. You could exegete actual Greek and understand the Hebrew language to translate. Like, oh yeah, what does it mean when you have a spirit of divination? We translate the word spirit here, but by the way, it's like the word python. It means snake, along with Apollo. Anyway, I don't want to get into it right now, but all I'm saying is, there's things that could be influential over people, and what are we going to do about it? Are we going to participate, or are we going to not entertain it? Are we going to come along our brothers and sisters? What does that look like? So, my official response, do not entertain it. Verse 17, she followed Paul and us, crying out, "These men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation." And this she kept doing for many days. That sounds great, doesn't it? So we got this girl, and she's saying, these men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you the way of salvation. All right, if anybody has already tuned out, tune back in, okay? I want you to tune back in. I know we're going to talk about some stuff that's a little interesting today, but I want you to tune into this because it's important for your life and your family. Ready? And this she kept doing for many days, Paul having become greatly annoyed. The word annoyed here can also be translated as grieved. Okay, so it's important to know that annoyed / grieved. If you could have an emotion that was annoyed and grieved at the same time, I don't know what you would call that, but this is kind of what's going on right now. Paul was grieved at the girl's condition, right? He cared about the girl. He saw that this girl had a spiritual influence over her, and that grieved him. At the same time, he was annoyed at the demonic spirit that was influencing her. So that's maybe how he's feeling both of these things. But Paul, why are you annoyed? She is telling the truth, isn't she? Why does that annoy you, Paul? Hear me, guys. Paul was annoyed. Would you be? Let's think about this. A few things that Mike wants to share. Ready? It is possible that the people who heard her saying this may have thought that she was talking about Zeus as the chief god of the Greek pantheon, which would not have made Paul happy. That's one possibility. The second possibility is it seems maybe more appropriate that this translation could be that she was saying, these men are servants of the Most High God who proclaim to you a way of salvation. Now it says the way, but if you look in context, it kind of looks like it could be translated as a way. Now we have chosen to choose the way, but it could be that she was saying that, hey, it's a way instead of the way. See, when Jesus came on the scene, he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say, I'm a way, right? And so here we are in this world today where people consider Jesus a way. Right? A way. And so if people are proclaiming a way, maybe you should be annoyed. Because it's not true. He isn't a way, he's the way. Okay? One more thing I would like to say is that we need to remember, and this is very important, what Jesus did when many demons spoke the truth in his presence. Do you guys remember that Jesus had demons in his presence before, and they were speaking truth? They were saying who Jesus was, truthfully, right? What did Jesus do in response? Jesus told them to be silent. Jesus told them to be silent. He did not entertain them. He did not have this long-blown conversation with them. He was not looking for their opinions. He told them to be silent. He did not want to hear them even say the truth. He did not need the affirmation of the demons, even if what they were saying was true. Now, this is how we can find ourselves in trouble. Are you guys tuned in? This is how we can find ourselves in trouble. Hear me out on this one. We allow people and spirits in our lives power to influence us too easily. They may say some true things, so as we begin to trust them because they're saying some true things, are you hearing me? As we begin to trust them, or at minimum, enjoy their affirmation, then in time, they begin to deceive, manipulate, distract, and encourage you to be prideful, encourage division, and attack your identity, your family, and your future. I need you guys to take heed. The enemy is strategic. He wouldn't come to you with a bold-faced lie. He would dabble it in a little bit. Maybe two positives and a negative. You know? You could have done a better job. True. You were late. True. You're worthless. False. And this is Satan's way. So as you allow in your life, if you were to allow people and spirits to speak into your life, be careful who you allow to do that. Be careful what you allow to do that. Jesus didn't allow it. You shouldn't either. So, here we are talking about Paul. He got greatly annoyed, and then he turned and said to the Spirit. Now remember, this happened for many days. Okay? He wasn't interested in entertaining. He was on a mission. He had to do something else. He wasn't scared of the demon. He wasn't worried about it necessarily, but he did become annoyed. He turned and said to the Spirit, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And it came out that very hour, or immediately, right? This is important because there are, Jesus shares, and we see this in the Bible, that there are certain demons that take more work. There are certain demons that perhaps take a bit of fasting, right? And so this is important to note, but in this particular instance, it was immediate. Who knows? Maybe Paul was fasting. We don't know. But maybe he just casted it out too. See, but this is important. Paul did this by his authority, right? Paul did it by his authority. Thank you. Yeah. Paul did this by the authority of Jesus, not by his authority. And so there is a very real spiritual battle happening, right? And I always had this weird graph, and I want to share it with you. It's my hands. That's all it is. I want to share this with you. Ready? Our power as human beings is here. Okay, this is about how much power we have. To give you an idea, your dog is here. Okay, some of you, your dog's a little higher than you, but it's fine. It's fine. So your power and authority is about here. Okay, the authority and power seemingly of angels and demons is about here. Over yours is what I would say, okay? And then the power and authority of God is here. I can't reach, but up here, right? And so I want to share something with you that has always helped me in my spiritual walk. If you ever stay here and attack here, you're always going to lose. You in your authority attacking demonic forces is not a smart idea. You will lose, okay? However, when we do this and we act like Christians in the authority of God, we can stomp this. Understood? It is not by our authority, but by His. So if you want to start attacking demonic forces with your own authority, good luck. Sounds like a fiesta I don't want to be a part of. Okay? But knowing who God is and knowing that He is above all power, all authoritative, knowing that we could tap into Him and use His authority by His will, not ours, we can conquer strongholds and demonic forces. Understood? Please don't play around. Okay, let's continue. Verse 19. But when her owners, speaking of the slave girl, saw that their hope of gain was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the rulers. And when they had brought them to the magistrates, they said, "These men are Jews." Pay attention to my words. "These men are Jews, and they are disturbing our city. They advocate customs that are not lawful for us as Romans to accept or practice." To the girl's owners, what Paul did by casting this demon out cut into their profit. Paul ruined an income stream, and they were mad about it. The owners of this girl didn't want to see her set free. They wanted her to be useful for personal gain. They were cool with her having this demonic influence because they received from it. Right? Because they received from it. There's a few things that I want to share with you. There are people in this world that are okay with the demonic because they get selfish things out of it. Okay? Not everybody thinks that demonic forces are wrong. In fact, some people are like, well, let's tap in because we can get more from it. Right? Let's hang out with this crowd too because we can get more from it. Let's dive into this type of lifestyle because we can get more from it. Right? There are people out in the world that think that way. Right? And I'm not saying you're excluded. Right? Because we still have flesh on our bones. So be careful to not think and consider things this way. We see here that the owners made an assumption. Ready? They assumed that Paul and Silas were Jews. Okay? We'll see how this ends up, but they judged a book by the cover. You see, they probably looked Jewish. They probably acted Jewish. Hey, they may even smelled Jewish. We don't know, right? But to them, by their eyes, they said, these people are Jewish. You know for a fact that Paul and Silas weren't saying, we're Jews, right? So they assumed by what they saw that they were Jewish. Let's see how that helps. It is important to note here that when dealing with people that were not Roman citizens, okay? So here's the distinction. If they were Jews, they wouldn't have been Roman citizens, right? They thought they were from Israel or Jerusalem or something, right? They're like, no, these people are Jews, right? So when dealing with people that were not Roman citizens, the law did not protect them, okay? The law did not protect them, and therefore they were accused of something, and they did not need necessarily a hearing or a trial. So they didn't try to give them a hearing or a trial. It gets worse. Ready? The next three words. The crowd joined. The crowd joined. Who knows that sometimes when unlawful things are happening, or things that aren't good for God's people, other people like to hop in too. But his social influence told me this is a good idea. Yeah, okay. The crowd joined in attacking them, and the magistrates tore the garments off of them and gave orders to beat them with rods. Even these magistrates were like, that's right, they're Jewish, rip off the clothes, whip them. Ready? And to be clear, not just punch them, hit them, with rods, it says. Luke was sure to include this detail. It wasn't just a smackdown, it was a little rougher and tougher. And when they had inflicted many blows, not one blow, but many blows, upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer, this is the first time we talk about this jailer, the jailer to keep them safely. Having received this order, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. So, not only in the outer prison, but in the inner prison. Let's tuck them away as far as we can. We don't want these people doing what they've been doing. It's really annoying. Put them as far as they can, put their feet in these things. Just so you know, stocks, by the way, can be very painful. Depending on how much you want to separate the holders, it can continue to be more and more painful, depending on how much they didn't like you, okay? Or how they felt that day, right? It wasn't like there was a real rule about it, especially if you were Jewish. So they get thrown in prison. They're bound in captivity. How did they respond to that? Let me ask you a question before you read on. How would you respond to that? Don't read on yet. Stop cheating. How would you respond? Okay, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Did you know people are listening in and watching your lives as it unfolds? Did you know that you don't always know that people are listening? Did you know you didn't always know people are looking at your Facebook? Facebook doesn't tell you who's looking at it. Did you guys see what happened to so-and-so, the Christian? Did you see? Did you guys see what happened to Paul and Silas? I wonder what they're going to do. I wonder how they're going to respond. I mean, they always say how good God is and how wonderful things are and how loving He is. I wonder what they think about God now. Well, they're in prison, in these stocks, locked up, inner courts, no hearing, in this inner prison. What would people say about you, or what would people see you respond with? Verse 26, and suddenly there was a great earthquake. Now, to be clear, earthquakes were common in this area, okay? Earthquakes were common. It's an argument, well, earthquakes are common. Yes, they are. Earthquakes are common in this area, so we understand that. They weren't uncommon. So let's continue. So that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's bonds were unfastened. Now, that's uncommon. Okay? See, the commonality is, yes, earthquakes happened in this area. The uncommon thing is most of the time, when that happens, all doors don't open and shackles come unloosed. Okay? That's not a normal thing for an earthquake. Okay, so an earthquake happens, all of a sudden the stocks just drop off? No, not normal. Okay? So this, to me, is a divine earthquake. Something that was supernatural, not common. When the jailer woke, okay, now, please pay attention. Some people, I think, don't get the story. Paul and Silas in jail, all these doors are opened, shackles removed, free. You hearing me? Free. When the jailer woke and saw that the prison doors were open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself. And I'll talk about why in a second. Supposing that that the prisoners had escaped. He knew, and this is what I was going to say, he knew that by Roman law, letting your prisoner escape was punishable and could have been worse than death. There's a punishment in some of Roman law where if you allow your prisoners to leave, you receive what they were going to receive. You become their replacement. Okay? So I don't know what was planned for Paul and Silas, but the jailer thought it was worse than him killing himself with a sword. Okay? So what happens in this moment? It says, but Paul cried with a loud voice, do not harm yourself. Is there anybody in your life that you know that you should yell at them, do not harm yourself? Once in a while, you just need to shout and let them know to not harm themselves. Do not harm yourself, for we are all here. We're here still. We're still here. We haven't left you. And the jailer called for lights and rushed in. So this guy probably got a torch and started running, looking around for these voices. Is it just voices I'm hearing? Are they here? And trembling with fear, he fell down before Paul and Silas. Here is this jailer, probably a pretty big, strong man, I'm assuming, who has probably dealt with many prisoners, probably ferocious ones, probably crazy people. And he is found here moved so much by what Paul and Silas chose to do to not escape that he trembles and falls down. Paul was more concerned about the jailer's life than he was about his own life. Paul was more concerned for the jailer than he was himself. He was in prison, not a nice place to be, damp, cold, dark, gross, painful, not a lot of food, if any at all. And he chose to stay here so that the jailer, he sensed for whatever reason that the jailer needed to know the God that they served. Verse 30. Then he brought them out and said, Sirs, what must I do to be saved? What you just did was ridiculous. Clearly, the God that you serve is real. What do I have to do to be saved? Tell me. This is not normal. You aren't acting normal. Now, Christians get told this all the time. It's not always good, right? Some of y'all are quirky. But if you acted like a Christian, a biblical Christian, maybe people would look at you and be like, the world doesn't act like that. Why are you acting like that? You ever act like a Christian and pursue Jesus, and then people come up to you like, why are you so different? Why aren't you talking crap behind their back? They talk bad about you. Why aren't you saying something back? Why are you letting them treat you that way? Why are you loving them instead of hating them? Why? Why are you more free with your money? Why are you so giving? Why are you not selfish? The whole world is like this. And it's like, well, because I have a relationship with God. That's why. Let's read it again. Then he brought them out and said, Sirs, what must I do to be saved? And they said, Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household. Now, you and your household, it's like Paul had such faith in this moment that he said, I see the way that you're acting, and I believe that your family's going to have the same type of faith. Not only will you get saved, but when we tell them the gospel, they're going to get it too. What he's not saying here is saying, hey, if you get saved, your family's good to go. He's not saying that. But he's believing in the Spirit right now at this moment. It's like, no, you and your family are going to be saved. I can see this. And they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all who were in his house. And he, which is the jailer that is, took them the same hour of the night and washed their wounds. This is the first time that their wounds from their beating are getting washed. And it's happening by the guy that was supposed to keep them in the prison. So he washed their wounds, and he was baptized at once, he and all his family. Then he brought them up into his house and set food before them, and he rejoiced along with his entire household that he had believed in God. He rejoiced that he had believed in God. The celebration was that he understood who God was. The celebration was that his eyes were opened. The celebration was that he understood who the Messiah was. And so that gave him reason to be like, I've gotten it wrong for a long time, but I just got it right. I finally figured out what's right. And he was excited about it. Are we still excited about the Messiah? Don't let salvation be just an event where you're excited for a moment. I remember when I got saved, I was super excited. I remember. And so I went crazy. I just told everybody about Jesus, just nuts, And I look back and I'm like, man, I wish I was still telling everybody the way that I used to. I still tell people about Jesus, don't get me wrong. But man, nothing mattered more. Nothing, not anything, not my homework, not my classwork, not my teachers, not my friends, nothing. I look at that and I was like, I was a zealous kid, I guess. I remember sitting in class, reading my Bible, and the teacher comes up and is like, you can't read that, we're doing, science. We're in science class. We need to be, I was like, this is better than science. I'm not saying you should do that. But I was so zealous about the Word and the gospel that that's what mattered most. My future was in God's hands, not in the public education. And it certainly still isn't. So now that the prison doors swung wide, where did they go? Where did they mount to next? Where did they decide to leave to? Let's see. But when it was day, the magistrates sent the police saying, let those men go. Let them go. And the jailer reported these words to Paul, saying, the magistrates have sent to let you go. Therefore, come out now and go in peace. They went back to prison. The doors were open. The shackles were loosed. And they went back to prison. I believe, on their own accord. Why would they do that? I'm actually getting ahead of myself because I know that's part of my notes, but why would they do that? You guys have any idea? I don't know about you, but if I'm in jail and these doors are swinging wide, I'm going. I'm out. I'm like, hey, this is provision from the Lord. So, therefore, come out now and go in peace. But Paul said to them, they have beaten us publicly, uncondemned. Men who are, hear me, Roman citizens. Paul, we didn't know you were going to have that up your sleeve. Roman citizens who have thrown us into prison, and do they now throw us out secretly? No, absolutely not. Let them come themselves and take us out. Let them put their dirty hands back on us to let us go. I think that would be best. He wanted a public display of their innocence. He did not want to leave in secret. He was more concerned about something than himself. And what was that something? He was being kingdom-minded. Why? How was he being kingdom-minded? Well, first of all, he wasn't thinking only of his health and his safety, which we're notorious for. He knew that if they were able to get publicly let go, ready? He knew that if they were able to get publicly let go, that would prove that they did nothing wrong, and it would help the church in Philippi to start stronger. He was thinking bigger. He wasn't thinking like, oh, me, what about me? What am I going to do? What about my life? He was thinking, no, see, because if we are condemned and we leave quietly, all people are going to ever know is that this church thing is a problem. But if they have to come here and they say, we're sorry, we did something wrong, then the rest of the people that are now believers are going to have a better foot to stand on. Let's make sure that they come and get us. Let's make sure that they come and get us. So it really does amaze me that they decided on their own accord that they went back to prison. Like, most of us don't choose to do that, right? I'm going to go back in bondage at this prison because I just feel like the Lord's leading that way. Even though he flung open all the doors and took the shackles off my feet, I feel like we should go back. You know, they had rights, and Paul knew they had rights. But it was more important for them to lay down their rights for God's kingdom purposes. We have so many people in this world right now, in this moment, and have for years, fighting for their rights. And many dedicate their whole life to fighting for those rights. And I'm not even saying that that's bad. But I am saying that there's these people that have dedicated their whole life to this. And I believe as believers, we need to be more occupied with sharing the gospel and less occupied with sharing our rights. And I feel like especially in the last 4 years, we have talked about sharing our rights more than we have talked about sharing the gospel. And I think that it's inappropriate. The gospel should be on your lips, not your rights all the time. So what do you spend your time on? Sharing your rights or sharing the gospel? Verse 38. The police reported these words to the magistrates, and they were afraid when they heard that they were Roman citizens. Because what they did was illegal. Right? What they did was not okay. Anybody that is accused of anything gets a hearing. And they just took it into their own hands, beat them, and shoved them in prison anyway. They didn't even ask them, do you have any rights? No. Verse 39, so they came and apologized to them. It's a good start. And they took them out and asked them to leave the city. Okay, bad start. We're sorry, you got to go. We're sorry, but you got to leave. We can't do this, but we really would like you to move on because you're ruining what's going on here, and we don't like it. So they went out of prison and visited Lydia. Look, we understand that you want us to leave, but we got some business to do first. Okay, we're going to go back to Lydia. And when they had seen the brothers, they encouraged them and departed. See, Paul was asked to leave, but he was not quite done yet. He was more concerned with what God told him to do than what they just told him to do. I get that you want me to leave, but I'm still on a mission. And I'm not done with my mission. He made sure that he encouraged the church there that he helped start before he left. He was like, listen, I get this is important to you, but this is more important. So he went back to Lydia and he encouraged the believers. When we move, ready? When we move on. This is a bonus question, by the way. We're about to close, but here's your bonus question. When we move into new seasons in our life, whether we choose them or not, do we leave building people up or do we leave tearing them down? We see Paul was shifted into this change, whether he liked it or not. He said, you got to go. You got to leave. And he decided to not leave people hanging, but go and build them up. So he went back, he built them up, and then he moves on. What are you doing in your life? Is your life about building people up, tearing them down? How do you leave conversations? Do you like to drop bombs? Do you like to encourage? Who are you? And then reference and say, like, is that what Jesus would have done? Is that who Jesus is? Are you ready? Here is your questions as we close. Write them down if you can so you don't forget. The point of coming on Sunday morning is not to make you feel good or just be a small part of your life, but it's hopefully to spur you on to get closer to Jesus. You have 6 more days to assist in that. Ready? Going back to influence, here's the question. Are you allowing influence in your life that doesn't belong? Maybe it feels good. Maybe you like it, right? But does it belong? And you can ask yourself, are you letting it belong because of some selfish motive? If the answer is yes, then you probably don't need to be influenced by it. Okay? Yeah, that's question number 1. Are you allowing influence in your life that doesn't belong? Question 2, are you more concerned with your safety and comfort? Hello, America. Are you more concerned with your safety and comfort or someone else's salvation? Are you more concerned with your safety and comfort or someone else's salvation? This is a question, but it's a challenge, this third question. You ready? So try to answer this personally for yourself. In what way, ready? Let's get specific with ourselves. In what way can you make your life more about God and less about you? In what way can you make your life more about God and less about you? I want you to pick one thing, and I want you to implement it this week. One thing, just one. In what way can you make your life more about God and less about you? Pick that one thing and implement it this week.